I'm going to show you guys how to bend your hardware on the back of your belt buckle so that it is ready to be soldered. Okay, so when we're done, we'll have something that looks like that. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to make the two little loops. And what I tend to use is a pair of round nose pliers and a pair of flat nose pliers. And I like to use the ones with the teeth. Usually I don't, but I'll tell you why and show you why in a second. So I'm going to bend these, and what I do is I hold it more towards one side so that the bend is arching over the pair of pliers. So I'll take my other hand and I'll bend it like that, and I'll start to form like a rainbow shape. Okay? So right now I have something like that. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll take this, and this is where I like to have the teeth, because I'll use the teeth to hold this straight, and I want to make it a little bit smaller. So I'll start to bend it in. And then I have a shape like that. Okay, and then I'll do that again. Hold it in the end, take my other pliers, bend it around like a horseshoe or a rainbow. I like rainbows. Okay. Once I get it like pretty good, I'll be like, I want to squeeze that a little tighter. So I'll put it in here and I'll squeeze it a little bit tighter. Be careful, don't have your fingers in there. You can pinch them and it hurts. So be careful where your hands are. So I got two pieces like that. And then the final thing is I'm going to get this hook ready. And if you've noticed, this hook has a little flattened area. It gives it a little more surface area for soldering, and it's not sticking off the belt buckle as much, and I think it just looks a little better. So what we're going to do is we're going to flatten one end with a ball peen hammer, and I'm just going to hold it. I'm just going to tap it. If it freaks you out to have your hand that close, just use your lucky pliers that you got there, all right? And then your hand's not in the way. All right. I think that looks nice. It's more functional. It won't get caught on anything. So now that I have that, this is the side that will be soldered to your buckle. All right, so now I got to bend up this. So I'll put my pliers on the flat part, and I do the same thing. I bend it up. I just don't bend it as much. You might have to make some adjustments later, but then you have your little hook. Before you do any of this, I've filed my edges so they're flat, just like riveting, so that when you go to solder them, they're flat. If you snip them, you're going to have that little point, and you want these to be flush. So before you do any bending, make sure they're filed flat, all edges. And where you can find these beautiful little pieces of brass that are already pre-cut, up there by the scissors and the small files, okay, in this little blue bowl. All right, you can start recording. So now that we've bent our hardware pieces into the right way, we're now going to solder them onto the back plate of our belt buckle. So we're going to do two different solder seams. First, we're going to solder the two loops, and then we're going to quench it and solder the hook. And I'm going to show you a couple tricks about soldering that you don't know yet. So I'm going to set the hook to the side, and I'm going to focus just on the two loops. Now, depending on how you put your belt buckle on, that depends how and where you put them on which side. Classically, we do it the right-handed way. I'm left-handed, so I always make things backwards by accident. So just know when you're putting your belt, however you put your belt on, really depends on where you're putting your hooks and loops, okay? So we got to think about that before you do it. So the first thing we're going to do is, because this piece of metal is way bigger than these two little tiny pieces, it's kind of like soldering the pin back. We're going to elevate this metal. We're going to make a little grill with these pieces of steel, which are found in this little ceramic bowl, and that allows, it's almost like a convection oven. It allows the heat to go underneath and come back out. So the heat's not being absorbed into this plate, this block, okay? So now that I have that, I'm going to put flux on my piece of metal where I'm going to have solder eventually. So we're going to focus on the two hooks right now. So I'm going to put some flux here. And then I know that I'm going to solder that hook eventually, and I'm going to do it around here somewhere, so I'm actually going to put flux there in hopes that when I'm soldering this, that area remains clean so I don't have to pickle, because that takes time. And then you have to wait. Okay, so let's see if that will work. Does anybody remember what these are called?
Oh, clamps.
Close. Say it louder, Chris.
Third arm.
Third arms. Good job. Okay, get a gong point for that. So now I'm going to set this up. And when I use these, they're a little bit tricky sometimes. I usually make them go down a little bit further than what they need to, and I let the metal kind of push on them because they lift up sometimes, you know? There we go. I'm going to slide this actually over a little bit more. And where I put this is kind of, I would say about 3/8 of an inch in, which is 1/8 shorter of a half of an inch, 3/8 to a half of an inch in this way, and about the same going this way, okay? So that's one setup. You can measure it if you want to. I like to use my magical eye to measure stuff like this because I can get it close enough, but it's really whatever you feel like doing is fine. So this is the setup. This, like I said, takes longer than actually soldering. Once I got that there, I am feeling pretty good about that. I'm going to use hard solder on this, and then medium or easy for the loop, or I'm sorry, the hook. So I'm going to put one piece of solder at each spot where it touches the plate. So I'm going to use a total of 4 pieces of solder. I'm going to scoot it up there, and I'm going to scoot this one. Now when I'm heating this up, I'm not going to put any of my heat on the brass. Why? What will happen to the solder if I just heat up the brass? Okay. You're going to heat up the whole entire piece, because if you only heat up the brass, it's all going to flow on the brass and it will not flow on the copper at all. So you got to get it equally heated, just like your hinge. This is a new component to soldering. This is just a steel cutoff of a rod, and what this does is this is forcing it to become a heat sink. Usually you don't want things to take the heat away. In this case, I do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this right in the middle, and what happens is I'm basically cutting this piece in half. So now, because this piece of steel is on here, it's actually going to block the heat and stay over here. So I only have to heat up this side of my belt buckle now. Saves a little heat, saves a little time. So now I'm ready to go. This is a size 2 torch tip. Size 1, 2, or even 3 will be alright, but 2 is probably the best size for this. I'm going to go kind of light first and let that flux heat up. And you know, if the solder could move, I just kind of let it bubble away. And then once it becomes clear, I take a second and move my solder back to where I want it to go. Okay, that's set up pretty well. I'm only going to focus on the on the copper plate. I'm going to kind of go underneath it. Kind of go all the way around until I'm going beyond heat patina, right? There's no more beautiful colors anymore. It's getting hot. Now I'm going directly over it. When it gets a dull red, like annealing, I'm going to start to focus on one side. Once you see it puddle, you can move on to the next side and do the same thing. There's the 2 loops. These could get hot, be very careful. This can be hot, be very careful. It's not quite hot yet at the edge. I'm going to set it here for hot steel. I'm going to clamp these off for a second. Quench it, and do you see how this is still clean? See a little trick? Still clean, right? Moving on real quick. You don't even have to pickle it now. You can just go on, little dab of flux every time you're soldering. I only need to use one of these now. Set this up, put it down, take a moment to get it set up the way you want it. I usually put this right in the middle, and I put it about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch in from the outside edge, kind of like that. You don't want it to extend out past, because then you'll see it, right? So it's really up to you where you want the placement to be. And when I solder this, I put 2 pieces of solder on this side of it. And I'm going to use easy or medium for this, because I've used hard on the other side. And I'm going to heat it up the same exact way, and I'm even going to use my little heat sink trick, because for this especially, what if I made this super hot? What could happen to these 2 pieces of metal? They could fall off, right? They could fall off. So I'm going to put this here, and once again, that prevents this side from getting super hot, so these 2 pieces are going to be safe. Okay, I'm going to move it over just a little bit more. Heat it up the same way. Do it kind of soft at first. Deflux the bubble. And then I'll power up. Heat it up underneath a little bit. I like to go along the steel so that it doesn't take too much heat from this side. And then I get that kind of hot. And then once I feel like it's getting pretty hot underneath, I'll just kind of focus directly straight up and down. And then I'll kind of zoom in closer and closer. Lift up because it's kind of curved. You can always use a solder pick or something else like another